Welcome to Carp Rigs from the Beginning. My name's Fairbrass and I'm here with Dave Chilton of Chilton Products to show you how to put together some of today's modern carp rigs. You'll find the video very easy to follow as we're showing you in close-up, step by step, exactly how to put the whole rig together, from tying the loop of your hair rig right through to putting the lead together and threading the line through the tubing. We're going to show you some of the popular knots which we can recommend with total reliability. Whether you're tying nylon or braid, there are certain knots you need to use to suit those materials best. So we're going to show you exactly how to do that. Newcomers to carp fishing today sometimes look at rigs with some confusion. So we're going to take that confusion away and show you the absolute simplest ways of putting things together. First of all, we're going to look at the raw materials you need for putting rigs together, and then we're going to show you how to tie some of the basic knots. Once we've done that, I'll show you how I put my nylon hook links together, and then I'll pass you over to Dave, who's one of the original innovators of the braided hook link, and he'll show you exactly how he puts his simple braided hook links together. Once we've looked at that, then I'll show you how to put a lead arrangement together and show you what type of lead you should use depending on the carp water that you're fishing. Once we've put the whole rigs together, we're going to take you to a local water and show you the rigs in action. Before we actually start fishing, we'll show you how to gauge the depth of the lake and how to find out what sort of features are lying on the bottom, which will dictate where you're going to put your hook baits. All in all, it's a complete guide to modern day carp rigs for the beginner. We know that you'll find it both interesting and instructional. Now I'm going to take you through some of the basic essential materials you need for putting the rigs together. This is plastic rig tubing. You thread the line through it behind the lead to prevent tangles on the cast. These connectors are used to join the tubing and the lead together, again to prevent tangles. The swivels are to join the main line coming down from the rod tip to the hook link. We've got various beads and silicone tube which have their uses. This is the nylon monofilament that I use for my hook links. Various hooks of different patterns. The lead weights, which are going to help us cast out to the fish and present the bait properly. The different types of boiling needles for putting your bait on, and the different types of scissors and nail clippers we use for cutting different materials. And lastly, the very popular Chilton braids, which are used for hook links. One of the most common questions asked is what knots do I use with each material? So I'm going to show you the knots I use when tying nylon, and then I'm going to pass you over to Dave, who's going to show you the very best knots to use when tying braid. First of all, I'm going to show you how to tie the loop for your hair rig, and then I'll show you how to tie the hook on. After that, we'll go through the knot you need to tie the nylon to the swivel, both from the hook link end and the rod end. Right, the nylon I'm using is Berkeley Trilene XT, very tough nylon, a bit expensive for putting on the reel, but for using hook links you can get about 100 metres of it for about £3 or £4. So what you do, leave about 2 inches I suppose, pinch between your thumb and forefinger, and with that piece of line there you just simply wrap it round itself and make a loop. Then with the other hand pull the loop tight and again wrap it round itself and pinch that again with your thumb and forefinger. Using one of these baiting needles, it's got a little crook on the end of it. You just pass it through the double loop and pull the single one back through. And that's now formed the loop of my hair. You can see that's not unravelling there, so you don't have to be all fingers and thumbs to tie it. You then pull it really tight and cut off the excess piece of line with a pair of sharp scissors or nail clippers. So that's the loop on the end of the hair rig. To tie the hook on, we've got to cut the hook link to the required length. So cut that there, move the hook link out of the way. Now we're going to tie the hook on using a knot called the knotless knot. And before I do so, I'm going to slide on a small piece of silicone tubing onto the line, and this will hold the hair very close to the hook to prevent it from tangling on the cast. So getting the end of line that hasn't got the loop tied on it, we just push the line through the tubing like that and go through very easily. And then with the point of the hook facing down towards the loop, you push the point of the hook through the hole inside the tubing. Now I'm using a size 2 hook here to make it easy for you to see. In a fishing situation in this country, I'd probably go down to a size 8 or a size 10 if there's not a lot of snags around. So all we have to do is push the point of the hook into that tubing there. That's now through the tubing, and just using my nail, I'll pull it back around the hook so that the tubing ends up opposite the point and barb of the hook. Then with the end of the line, just pull that down to shorten your hair rig. Next thing I'm going to do is put the bait on. Using the same gardener baiting needle, I just push the needle through the boilie and out the other side. With the crook on the end of the needle, I just hook that into the hair and just pull the boilie back down onto it. Now I'm going to use a hair stop, which you just put into the loop and then pull tight. And then once you've done that, cut the remaining hair stops off like that. It's always better to do that when you've got the hair stop inside the loop rather than cutting it first and then trying to fiddle about putting it inside there. Pull the hair down so you've got about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch between where the hair comes off the hook and the top of the boilie. And then gripping the hook very tightly between your thumb and forefinger, past the end of the line, through the hook from the back to the front. It's very important that it goes through that way. Now you have to keep these fingers very, very tightly squeezed on the hook so that when you're wrapping the line around the hook, the hair doesn't get shorter. So we're just going to wrap the line around the hook, going down from the eye to the point. Minimum number of times is 5, maximum as many as you want. Okay, now to stop that unravelling, I just bring the next finger into play, just hold it tightly, and then with the end of the line, I just poke that through the hook the same way I did the first time, going from the back to the front, and then pull it tight. And that is the knotless knot. Doesn't unravel, doesn't pinch the line, keeps it very, very strong. You can see at this point here where the line's coming off of the hook, the line hasn't gone curly, hasn't changed colour, which indicates it hasn't been pinched, so it hasn't been weakened. And that basically is how you tie the hook on. Very, very simple. Now I'm going to show you the knot I use to attach the nylon to the swivel. I use exactly the same knot for attaching the main line to the swivel as well. It's called the Palomar knot. So taking your swivel, you pass the line through one of the eyes, and then you go back the way you came. So if I continued pulling that line, the loop would disappear out of the swivel again. So I've now got the swivel running on 2 pieces of line with the loop at this end. And I'll turn the rig around and I'm going to tie a knot in that loop. Like so. So I've now got the swivel inside the knot I've tied in that loop. Then you simply pass the other end of the swivel through that loop and pull the knot so it's all the right side of the swivel, like so. Then I'm going to wet it, a little bit of saliva, and then holding both bits of line, just pull it nice and tight. That is the finished Palomar knot. Very small. Again, you can see if I let the line go limp, there's no coloration change here on the line. It hasn't been flattened or pinched or weakened. There's no curly part to the line there at all. So it's maintained its strength. And that's the reason I use the Palomar knot, is it's very, very difficult to pinch the line above the knot and weaken it. So it's a very, very strong, very reliable knot. Just cut off the tag end of line, sharp pair of scissors, and that's it. Done. I would use exactly the same knot to attach the line from the rod to this side of the swivel. In that instance, you'd have to pass the boilie or the hook through the loop, just as I passed the end of the swivel through the loop this time. So that is my basic hair rig tied, and now I'm going to pass you over to Dave, who's going to show you how he ties his basic hair rig using braid.
Before we start to tie a braided line, we'll just explain to you what a braided line actually is. Nylon monofilament is exactly what it says. It's a single section of extruded material which we all use on our reels. It's excellent stuff, it's low priced and it's reliable, but it does have its limitations. A braided line is made up from multiple fibres which are woven, for want of a better word, and braided into sections. You can see here this multi-strand material, which is halfway to braiding, has got separate filaments in it. The advantage over weaving or braiding separate filaments is that it will give you a much more supple line as opposed to nylon. If we hold this piece of nylon out here, you can see it's comparatively stiff and it follows its direction, whereas a braided line has got much more suppleness to it, and because the braided line is much more supple, it's used to great effect to catch a lot of carp, to present our bait in as near as a natural manner that's possible. So to clarify, a nylon line is much stiffer than a braided line, and the braided line will allow you to present your bait in a manner that is as near as natural as possible. The bait and your rig will not be restricted by the material stiffness. So, first of all, we'll take a piece of braided line, get the scissors. Always use good quality scissors for braided line. Poor quality scissors will leave you with loose ends and make it much more difficult to tie. So first of all, we'll tie the same knot as Danny tied, but this time using braided lines. So this is a very simple and very efficient no knot or knotless knot being tied with a braided line. The first thing you'll notice about tying braided lines is they're very much softer than nylon. So You do have to take a little bit of care in tying them, but after a few practice sessions it will become child's play. Simply fold the line in two. I usually twist it. It helps to keep things together. Simply make the loop, just as Danny did. Use a baiting needle if it helps you to pass the line through the loop. And then it's important that the size of the bait you're using, you don't want the loop to be too big. On the other hand, you don't want it to be too small to make life difficult when you're baiting up in darkness. So we've passed the line through. It's a simple overhand knot, and we gently pull it together. Never hurry knots. You've got all the time in the world, and by taking your time you'll end up with a totally satisfactory knot. I've left a large loop on here to accommodate for large baits using a large hook. So there we have the hair loop, which you're going to use to attach your baits. When I cut the tag ends off, with braided line being soft, I never worry about the tag end being large. It's soft, it will flatten, and ideally it won't close on you should you exert too much pressure on the loop. So always, with all your knots, with a braid, leave a reasonable tag end. It does no harm at all. Right, we've got our hook, we've got our braid, and we'll make a very simple but very efficient rig using the no knot or the knotless knot. It's called many things these days, and it couldn't be easier. Take your braid and pass the braid through the back of the eye. Take the slack up and then judge the distance that you want your boilie to hang off the bait. What I often do is mount the boilie before tying the knot. Take the baiting needle and gently ease through it. Take the bait, mount it onto the hair, and we'll just leave it in that position for a second or so, which gives us the ideal opportunity to adjust the bait. There, I'm happy with that. Grip the shank, grip the braid, and then with the finer braids you will have to tie the knot working the line over the shank, the first turn away from the gap of the hook of the eye. Always check your hooks to make sure that the eye is fully closed. Start to wind down, keeping tension on the braid and the hook. Take your time while doing this. There's no point in rushing something. You'll only have to unwind it and start again. I'm happy with that angle now that the hair is coming off the line. But before I release that, keep your finger on the turns and then pass the braid back down through the eye and gently draw it to a close. Now we've got to this stage, it's simply a matter of fastening the bait to the hair in a permanent manner by using these very efficient boilie stops. Simply open the loop up, pass the boilie stop through the loop, and then gently draw the boilie stop down to the bait and trim off. Now what we're going to do is to attach the swivel using the very reliable grinner knot. And once again, there's ways of making life easy when tying knots. Pass the line through the swivel twice. Passing the line through the swivel twice helps to reduce the strangulation which may take place when braided line is pulled tight. So we've gone into the swivel and out, back in and out, and then take up some slack, make the rig shorter because it will extend. And what I do is simply, before we start to tie the knot, put the line together by simply wrapping it around. This will help keep the basis of that doubled line together, which we're going to use to tie the knot. And all of those turns will come out when the knot is being tensioned. So we've got doubled line from the swivel to that exit point. Simply make a small loop, hold it against that doubled line, and then with the tag end, or with the leading edge of the line, the braided line, pass it through the loop 4 times. This particular knot has been around for years, and with braided lines in particular, it's very good because it puts very little strangulation onto the line, which could result in break-offs whilst playing a fish. Pass the line through the loop 4 times, gently pull it tight, but not too tight at this point, and then take the main line in the hook link and pull it along slowly, and you'll see those turns coming out. Before we pull the line finely tight, moisten the end of the line where the turns are, gently pull down, helping the line on its way, and the tag end. It's a very simple knot that with a few practice sessions it will be easy to tie and become child's play. There is the no knot at one end and the grinner, the 4-turn grinner knot at the other end, and that's the basis of the rig. Braided lines come in many different shapes, many different forms and thicknesses, and are different in materials. They also have their own sets of behaviour. Silkworm, which we've just tied this rig with, has a tendency to lie around the bottom, not fall on the bottom, but raised off the bottom. And if we put the rig in water, you'll notice that the central portion of the rig will not actually sink to the bottom, due to the low gravity in water. Let's pop it in. There we have it. Now for some people it might concern them that the line is looping off the bottom, and they could possibly believe that it could interfere with the presentation by the line catching on the pecks of carp, on the fins of carp as they're foraging and feeding. I personally prefer to fish with this way because it allows my hook bait to move into the carp's mouth without any hindrance whatsoever. The raised loop allows the bait to move. If we can just pierce it, there we are. Anyway. No, there we are. The raised loop will allow that bait to enter a carp's mouth without any restrictions. So I prefer to fish this way, but for some people it does concern them. So what do we do to keep that line on the bottom? Well, it couldn't be easier because there is such a product which helps this. This is a very special putty which has been made to anchor itself onto braided lines. One tub will last an awful long time because we're using very tiny pieces of putty, and this putty will anchor itself to the braid without being dislodged. Very simply, take the putty, fold it round and roll it into a smooth profile. Turn it a few times between your finger and thumb and it will develop into a torpedo type shape. Once you've put the putty on, simply grip the braid and grip the putty and pull it along to dislodge it. Once more, twist your finger and thumb, moulding the putty to the braid, and once again, with finger and thumb, hold it tight, pull, and it will dislodge it. You can already see that there's darker portions where the putty's left its mark on the braid. These darker portions, with tiny particles of putty on them, is enough to let the braid slowly settle on the bottom. We don't want a line that's going to sink very, very fast. We want a line to settle against the bottom, but only just. Usually one or two pieces or one or two places is sufficient to topple the braid and give it that extra weight within water to allow it to sink. Remove the putty. Let's look at the situation now. We'll simply drop it into the tank. As you can see, the braid's immediately sunk to the bottom. Braided lines these days come in many shapes and forms. This is a braided line with a difference. It's called snake bite. It's basically a very strong, supple braided line which has had a plastic anti-tangle coating which we can remove at any section. This gives us many choices of presentation. So first and foremost, we'll tie again a bottom bait rig using the snake bite. Take the required amount off. Never be afraid of taking a bit more material than you need when you're starting. It makes life a lot easier. First of all, the bait loop again. As before, fold the line back, The snake bite material you'll find very, very easy to work with. Make an open loop and simply pass that loop through the main loop. Pull tight and trim off. So we've made the bottom loop, cut the tag end off, everything's flying around today. There we have the bait loop for the hair. Take the hook again, pass the line through the back of the hook, measure the distance between the loop for your bottom bait, and once you're happy with the length of the hair, hold the shank of the hook and the line under tension and begin winding. We'll start to wind the easy way this time. The snake bite hook link is very unlikely to slip through any tiny gap in the hook. So start turning and work your way slowly down the shank, keeping the turns nice and tight, bedded up against each other. If you're not happy at this point, simply unwind and start again. Once the turns have been completed, hold them with your spare finger, take the line once more through the back of the eye and gently pull tight. There we have the no knot with the snake bite. So once again, we've tied the very reliable no knot onto this oversized hook, which you'd normally use for European fishing, but we've used it to make things a little bit easier to see. Mount the bait using these braid baiting needles with no barb on. Hold the line firmly and just ease the bait onto the line, pulling the line through the bait. Leave yourself enough of a loop to pass the hair stop through. When using larger size baits, don't skimp on the amount of hair stop material you're using. The bigger the stop, the more it will support the bait. Now we have a bottom bait tied with the snake bite, which behaves as a normal stiff rig. There are a few more things we can do with it, but we'll come to that in a moment. Again, we need a swivel on the other end of the rig, and a very, very easy and reliable knot using stiff rigs is to have a large loop. Take the swivel, pass the leading line through the swivel, take enough material to make life easy for tying. Hold that doubled line, make a loop, and pass the swivel through the loop twice. There's once, twice, and ease the knot down, leaving yourself a loop which should allow the line enough movement to settle on the bottom. This particular knot, surprisingly, although it's a strangulation type of knot, will not affect this particular line. Although some other lines do require more than 2 turns through to make them secure. And there's our bottom bait stiff rig. Now, I mentioned before it's a very versatile line to use. There's many things you can do with it. And to give it a little bit of spice, what we can do is we can alter the behaviour of the hook on the rig inside the carp's mouth. And we can do that very simply by breaking a section of plastic coating off, and that will allow the hook to hinge around. Now, there's various ways of breaking the coating. You can use blunt scissors, and using the end of the scissors, simply crimp it. That small movement of the scissors is enough to break the coating, and now you'll see the hook link has got a totally different action. It's hinging on one pivot point, and that short section of line coming from the eye acts as an extended hook shank, and this has caught an awful lot of carp. You can imagine that inside a carp's mouth, tumbling and turning, hopefully being able to catch on something, as opposed to the normal stiff rig which would enter the carp's mouth one way and come out the same way, very much the same as nylon. So there we have a hinge rig which inside the carp's mouth offers many opportunities for hooking. We've just seen how we can tie a very simple stiff rig and convert that stiff rig into a hinge rig. Here is a final variation using the snake bite, where we're going to remove a reasonable section of coating and attach the bait, which will be popped up off the bottom using a buoyant bait. You can buy pop-ups ready-made in most tackle shops. The first thing we have to do is remove a section of coating. We can either dip this section in hot water for 45 seconds, where the plastic material will substantially soften up, making removal easy, or by using a blunt knife or the back of scissors, simply trap the snake skin, the snake bite, under the blunt section of the scissors or knife and apply pressure. The pressure there is enough to give us a start where you can see we've already removed a section of coating. Simply hold the line tightly, grasp the exposed section and gently ease back. And as you can see, we're removing the coating stage by stage. Never attempt to remove too much coating in one go. It makes life a lot easier. There's the coating. There's the exposed braid, and this is the business end of the rig where we've got the suppleness to allow that pop-up to move around in water. Take the hook, make a loop, form the hair loop as we did before, pull the tag end and trim. Pass the line once more. Through the back of the eye. Take your buoyant bait. Ease the baiting needle through buoyant baits. Be careful with them because sometimes they take more effort. Be careful you don't stab yourself with the pointed end. Mount the bait as before. Ease it through so the loop is just evident. And leave a shorter gap to tie the hook, and about that distance. Start with your turns. Don't be concerned if you're winding the coating around the coated line is exposed. It will make no difference. Once again, start your turns until you're happy with the angle. Take the leading line once more through the back of the eye. And gently draw tight. This is a very, very simple knot. Many people think it can come undone during the course of playing a fish. It can't come undone. Once the pressure on the line is above the hook, above the eye, it will not slip back. Now all we need to do now is give the bait, the buoyant bait, a chance to behave. In this particular instance, we're going to mount a double pop-up. Once more. Ease it through. Leave your small loop exposed. Pass the stop through and gently ease it down. Now the final stage is to remove a section of coating and to use the coating as a base for gripping the putty, which will counterbalance the buoyancy of your two baits. So I want to leave an extended hook shank. It does seem to catch an awful lot of fish. Apply pressure to the line and gently ease the line back, making a break once more. Try to get your fingers on the exposed section and gripping the plastic coating, gently ease it back. Now it's at this point in time where you have to decide how far you want your bait to sit off the bottom. If you're fishing some waters which have got flannel weed which veers above the bottom, you may only require the pop-ups to be 1 inch or 2 off the bottom. On some waters where the weed is thicker on the bottom, just simply pull the coating back, which gives it that concertina look. Don't worry about that compressed plastic. In fact, it's going to be of enormous help to you. Take your heavy putty, in this case it's heavy metal we're using, and agitate it and stretch it, and the more we actually work the heavy metal, the softer it will become. And the easiest way to make it soft is to rub it between the palm of your hands vigorously, and then you'll see the material has transformed into something else, much softer. Take a piece of heavy metal, lay it against the compressed strip back plastic, which acts as a wonderful anchor. Mould it around to shape, and then simply test it in water. As you can see, the hook is completely exposed. The baits are off the bottom, away from the debris and weed, which sometimes, very often, spoils presentation. That's a very simple, effective method to use, especially if you fish in waters which the bottom is not suitable for fishing bottom baits. So, there we have a few examples of how to tie rigs which are very efficient, which are totally safe and reliable. It all depends on the waters that you're fishing, what type of rig you wish to combat the carp with. And now we'll go over to Danny, who's going to tie some of his own preferred rigs and attaching, most important part, the rigs to the lead and catch your first carp.
Dave's just given you all the information you need to know to tie successful braided hook links. As I said earlier in the video, I don't use braid anymore. I use nylon for virtually 100% of my carp fishing nowadays. So what I'm going to show you is how to tie a nylon hook link, but we're going to swap it round from the reverse angle so you can see what it will look like tying the knot in your hands. So what I'm going to do first of all is get all the bits and pieces I need together to tie it. We've got our nylon, hook bait, there's a hook there, some 1/2mm silicone tube, sharp pair of scissors, and a size 8 swivel to go on the other end of the hook link. I'm going to show you how to do the knotless knot and the Palomar knot, as I said before, from the reverse angle so you can see what it will look like when you're actually tying it, and you might find it easier to follow that way. Right, so tying the knotless knot, first of all, in my left hand here, I'm right-handed, so in my left hand, between my thumb and forefinger, I've got about 2 or 3 inches of line pinched between my thumb and forefinger. That's actually going to form the loop of the hair rig. So we'll bring that down a little bit shorter. And with this bit of line here, we're just going to wrap it behind itself and pinch it down with my thumb and finger to form that loop there. Now to tie the knot in the loop, we just pull it tight, and then again do the same thing, wrap it round itself and pinch it together. Bring our baiting needle into play. That comes from the back to the front, and then you pull the single loop through the double loops and then pull really tight. Sharp pair of scissors, we cut off our tag end of line. Don't need that. And then we're going to want to pull about 3 or 4 inches of hook link more than we actually need for the hook link to take into account the knot. So if I want an 8-inch hook link, I'm going to pull 11 or 12 inches of hook link out and then cut that off. So I'll cut that there. Now, before I actually tie the knot, I'll get a piece of 1/2mm silicone tube. I'll cut a very small piece of that, and then I'll thread it onto the end of the line there. See, that's gone on easily. That's now on the end of the line. Obviously that hasn't got the loop on. Then what we do, with the hook point facing down towards the loop, we just carefully put the hook point into that bit of tube. You can see there the point's now through the silicone tube out the other side. Once you've done that, you just ease it round on the hook. I always do it at this end of the hook link because this bit's going to be cut off, so if you do damage this bit, it doesn't matter. So then we pull the hook link through that silicone tube to shorten the hair down, and before I actually tie the knot, I'm going to put the boilie on and the boilie stop so that when we tie the knot we get the length of the hair exactly right. That's another advantage of using the knotless knot. So we get our boilie and just ease the baiting needle through it. Put the baiting needle through the loop and then ease the boilie back onto it. You can see there, if I pull that off, the knot of that loop is inside that boilie. That's where you want it to be. That stops the boilie moving about on the hair, stops it going next to the hook and impeding the hook when it's in the fish's mouth. So just ease that through again. Pull the boilie on. We get our hair stops. As I said before, you use a length of hair stop first to make it easier to get through your loop. Pull the loop tight and then we cut the hair stops off. Just makes it a little bit easier to do. Okay, so your boilie's now on the hair, and we'll just pull that hook link down so we've got about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch between where the hair comes off the hook and the top of the boilie. That's very important that you've got a decent clearance between the two, and I'll show you why that's important once I've tied the knot. So to tie the knotless knot, in my left hand, because I'm right-handed, I want to pinch the hook and the hair very, very tightly with my thumb and forefinger. It's very important to pinch it really, really tightly so that the hair doesn't get shorter when I'm tying the knot. And then with the other end of the line, I just pass it through the eye of the hook, going from the back to the front, like so. And then what I'm going to do is wrap the line around the hook going down towards the point, and then this middle finger is going to come into play, trap the whole thing tight so I can put the line back through the hook to tighten the knot up. So all we're doing now, with a lot of tension on the line there, we're just wrapping the line around the hook, going down towards the eye. Minimum 5, maximum as many as you want. And these middle fingers coming into play to hold that knot tight. The line's going back through the eye of the hook from the back to the front, and then before I take that middle finger away, just pull it all tight, and that's it. That is a knotless knot done. Doesn't unravel, doesn't weaken the line. That's another very important thing. You see the line there, it hasn't discoloured, hasn't gone curly, hasn't been pinched flat, stayed exactly the same breaking strain. We haven't damaged the line at all there. Our hair's the right length, that hasn't shortened while I've been tying the knot. Absolutely perfect, and I'll show you a couple of the other advantages of the knotless knot once I've tied the swivel on at the other end. And to tie that on, I'm going to use the Palomar knot. So we bring our size 8 swivel into play, and at the other end of the hook link, we just pass the line through the eye of the swivel, and then we go back the way we came. So if I carried on pulling that line, it would just disappear back out the swivel again. So you've now got a loop through the eye of the swivel. Then what we're going to do is tie that loop in an overhand knot, just like we did for the hair. See there now, that loop there, been tied in a knot with the swivel inside it. And what we're going to do is this loop at the end, we're going to pass the swivel through that and then pull the whole thing, pull in this bit here, we're going to pull the whole thing the right side of the knot. Yeah, so there's nothing on that side of the swivel at all, everything's pulled the right side of the swivel there. And then before we pull it down tight, we just wet it with a bit of saliva just to help everything move easily. And I'm going to hold these 2 bits of line very tight and pull the knot down. It's very important that all the loops there are the same size before you tighten the knot down. If one's smaller than the other, then you can pull either one of these bits of line to tighten down and make sure the loops are the same size. So a little bit more saliva just to make sure it moves easily. And then these 2 bits of line you're going to hold and pull down and pull really tight. I'm pulling both bits of line at once there to tighten the whole thing down. That's come out perfect. Sharp pair of scissors come into play. We just cut off the tag end of line, and you can see there again the beauty of this knot is it hasn't pinched the line here just above the swivel. The line's exactly the same colour as it was, hasn't gone curly or anything, it's maintained the same knot strength. Absolutely perfect knot for tying nylon to the swivel. You could use it to tie it to the eye of the hook if you wanted to, but I obviously prefer the knotless knot, and it's the same knot I would use there on that side of the swivel coming down from the rod tip. I'd use a Palomar again, but when I tied it, the end of the hook link would go through that large loop, and then I'd pull the knot the right side of the swivel again and then tighten it down. Very easy to tie, almost foolproof. So that basically is my standard nylon hook link, and we're going to use this later on in the video to catch a few fish. As I said before, the knotless knot has got a lot of qualities. It's easy to tie, it doesn't damage the hook link, and the other thing is it gives really, really good hook holds. So what we're going to do is look at the hook as it would react in a fish's mouth to show you just how good it is. So if you imagine the palm of my hand to be the fish's mouth, it's sucked in the bait, the edge of the lips will be here. Because the hook link's kicking out the front of the hook at this point here, what's going to happen is as soon as I tighten that hook link, can you see there the hook is turning down into my hand, into the fish's bottom lip area. As soon as I tighten the hook link, if I take it out of my hand again and pull, can you see there straight away, as soon as I tighten the hook link, as soon as the fish starts to move away with the bait, that hook's going to flip over into the bottom lip area. And you can actually see later in the video where the hook has actually taken hold in the fish's mouth and torn down slightly to end up in the bottom lip using exactly this hook and hook link arrangement. Now you can completely ruin this by using too short a hair, and that's what I said earlier on, you need a good clearance between the two. When I'm lying it in the palm of my hand there must be a decent clearance between the two. So when we tighten the hook link, the hook starts turning down. So if I shorten the hair just temporarily here, so the hook almost looks side hooked, you can see there, the boilie almost looks side hooked. A lot of people use very short hairs like this. If we leave that in the palm of my hand there, exactly the same way as it was. If we pull that now, can you see how it's just not hooking my hand because the hair's too short. It's just bouncing out. If we lengthen the hair again, doing exactly the same thing. As soon as I pull the hook link, can you see there, it's going straight into my hand again. Exactly the same rig, just with a longer hair, and it's hooking me straight away again. So it's very important to have a good clearance between the hook and the boilie, and in conjunction with that knotless knot, that should work absolutely perfectly. I think this point it's worth explaining why I use the hooks I use. This particular hook is made by Mainline Connections. It's their Carp hook number 2. This is a size 6 with a 20mm boilie. It's quite a small 6, and that to me is about the right ratio from hook size to boilie size. You see the hook there, it's got a straight point and an in-turned eye and a medium length shank. And that's the sort of hook I prefer. Any hook with a straight point, in-turned eye, medium length shank, coupled with this knotless knot, will turn down nicely into the fish's mouth. And the reason I use hooks with a straight point is I think they catch hold quicker than one with an in-turned point. What I'm going to do now is tie a pop-up rig using nylon. But first of all, I'm going to explain why I changed the design of hook I use when using pop-ups. This is my bottom bait hook, the Mainline Connection hook size 6. This is a size 6 Gamakatsu hook, which has got a straight eye and a straight point. But the eyes, you can see there's not in-turned. The eye on this hook is very slightly in-turned. On this one it isn't. The reason I'm using the hook without an in-turned eye is when I'm using pop-ups I want the hook to stand up straight. So I use a hook with a straight eye, which helps it to stand up straighter. Because the nylon's a little bit stiffer than braid, when it kicks out the front it can cause the hook to turn over and sit over like that rather than sitting straight up. So if I use a hook with a straight eye it will sit up better. I'm going to use a larger hook as well because a straight eye won't cause the hook to turn in as good as an in-turned eye. So using a larger hook will compensate that. So now we're just going to look and see how I tie the nylon hook link. I'm going to use the knotless knot again, but the hair's going to be a slightly different length and the boilie's going to be a little bit closer to the hook. And then I'll show you how I attach the counterbalance, which will be down here somewhere, to actually hold the buoyant boilie off the lake bed. So what I'm going to do now is show you how to tie a nylon hook link for use with a pop-up. So we're going to do the knotless knot to begin with. So you want a couple of inches of line pinched between your thumb and forefinger. Just wrap that behind itself. So you've got a loop pinched in there. And I want to tie a slightly smaller loop this time because I'm using a smaller boilie for the pop-up. So I'll pull that loop tight, and then again wrap it behind itself. Then with a baiting needle, go through the double loop and pull the single loop back through. That's my loop, and I'm going to use a baiting needle to pull it nice and tight, and then cut off that tag end of line there. As I said before, we want 3 or 4 inches more line cut off than we're actually going to need for the hook link to take into account the knots. So I'm going to use probably a 6 or 8 inch pop-up hook link, so you're going to want 10 or 12 inches of nylon cut off there. Exactly as we did before, I'm going to have a small piece of 1/2 mm silicone tube on the end of the hook link. The reason I use this silicone tube is it keeps the hair in the right place when you cast and stops the hair tangling around the hook on the cast. And it also means that once you've caught a fish, you can sometimes use the same rig again if the hook's still sharp, because the hair stops the silicone stops the hair getting all mashed up when you're playing the fish. So I've just, with the hook pointing down towards the loop, I've just gone straight through that silicone again. You can see there the two are connected via that silicone. So we're going to pull the silicone round to the right place on the hook, and then pull the hook link down to get the correct length hair. Now with a pop-up, I want the boilie and the hook to be closer together, so that's why I'm using a larger hook, so that the hook will still turn into the fish's bottom lip even though I've got a shorter hair. So if you want to use short hairs, you need a larger hook and a smaller boilie to make sure the hook still turns down. So that's what I'm doing this time. So we're going to put our boilie on, about an 18 mm pop-up boilie here. It's got a bit of cork in the middle of it, so I've moulded some paste around the cork, so you just have to ease the needle through very gently. I'm just twisting the needle through to get it through the cork, because obviously it's much harder there. There we are out the other side. Ease the boilie onto the hair, and you can see the loops ending up in the middle of the boilie there to stop it moving about. Hair stops. So hold the boilie on the hair, cut those off. And now we're going to bring the boilie down quite a bit closer to the hook. You can see there it's just sitting off the back of the bend there. That's where I want my hook bait when I'm using a pop-up. But this bit of silicone here, we're going to move this out of the way so we can tie our knotless knot. Pull that up the hook. So there's almost no hair at all at this point. I'll move it back down once I've tied the knot. Now, if you're going to tie a hair as short as this for your pop-ups, you might find it hard to grip the hook tightly and still keep the hair short. So if you want to take the boilie off at this point, you can do, as long as you keep the hair the same length. So that's what I'm going to do this time, just to make it easier for me to tie the knot. Take the boilie stop off, take the boilie back off, keep the loop the same length, and keep the bit of silicone out of the way of the shank of the hook, which we're going to tie the knot on. So I pinch very tightly between the thumb and forefinger, and then with the end of the line I go through the eye of the hook from the back to the front. Then I'm going to wrap down the hook and bring this middle finger into play to hold the wraps tight. So holding everything very firmly, just wrap down the hook. As I said before, minimum 5, maximum as many as you want. And then the middle finger comes into play to hold the whole thing tight. And then the line goes back through the eye of the hook, from the back to the front, pull tight, and that's it, knotless knot done again. So we pull out a bit of silicone tube down towards the knot, and then we're going to put our boilie back on, which will end up quite close to the hook, because that's how I want it with my pop-up. So twisting that through again, out the other side there. When you first start your carp fishing, you don't need to worry about tying on your pop-ups, which a lot of people do nowadays. It's really not that necessary if you're only fishing during the day. The reason for tying them on is to stop them taking on more water because you haven't punctured them and put a hole in them, but if you're just starting your carp fishing, you really don't need to worry about that. So now that's how our pop-up's going to sit in the water, much closer proximity. When I drop this in the tank in a moment, I'll explain why I want the two closer together, and I'll also explain when I use a pop-up and when I wouldn't. So the next thing we need on the hook link is a counterbalance, something to hold that buoyant bait down against the bottom there. The simplest thing of all to use is just a simple split shot. This is an AA size split shot. You can see there I've got the gap of the split shot pointing up towards the point of the hook. And what that does is it means that most of the weight is on the front of the hook link. The reason that's important is when the thing comes to rest, you want it to be facing away from the lead. So most of the weight is on this side, which causes it, when it comes to rest, to sit facing away from the lead. What you don't want to happen is the thing to be sitting so that the hook is pointing towards the lead. So by having most of the weight falling on that side of the hook link, it'll always fall away from the lead. Now again, as a beginner that's fine. If you don't squeeze the shot too tight, you shouldn't damage the hook link, but there is a better way of doing it and it's very easy to do, so that's what I'm going to show you how to do now. So if we take that shot off, just opening it up with a nail, you can see there the hook link hasn't been damaged, it hasn't discoloured or anything at that point, but there is a better way. So what we're going to do, we'll put that shot to one side for a moment and I'll show you how I'm going to attach it as an improvement. So we get a bit of braid, doesn't matter what braid you use for this, cut a few inches off with your braid blades, and then we're going to tie a sliding stop knot on this line which we're going to attach the shot to. So laying the braid against the line there, we're just going to make a loop in that braid, and then we're going to pass this tag end through the loop 4 or 5 times. So that's once through, over the hook link and through the knot again, 2, over and through, 3, 4, 5. And then we can add a little bit of saliva just to help it tighten down properly. Then we're going to pull either end of the braid, not the hook link, just either end of the braid, tighten that stop knot down, and that is a stop knot done. Very, very easy to tie. As I said before, you want all of the weight falling at the front of the hook link, at this part on the front of the hook link here. So what we're going to do, before we tighten that knot down fully, we're going to make sure that this bit of line at the bottom here is actually what the shot's going to be pulled onto. We've got to make sure that that's coming off the front of the hook link. So we'll just pull it down nearer the hook, and if I hold the hook there and then holding the hook link quite tight, pull this bit down the hook link, the knot will actually turn round so that this piece here comes out the front. Now I've got the hook there clamped between my fingers, hook link pulled tight. If I pull this piece of line, the knot will turn round so that this piece of line is coming off the front. It just has to go that way. And now I know it's coming off the front of the hook link, I'll just tighten it down a little bit more, and that's tight enough so it won't move on the cast, but it's not too tight that it'll actually damage the line. You can see there that's coming off the front of the hook link there. So we'll cut off the piece on the top, which we don't need, again using our braid blades. These are something really worth getting. If you're using braid, get a pair of these braid blades. They make it much, much easier. It doesn't fray at all, just a perfect cut. So now what we're going to do is squeeze our shot on this piece of line here. We can squeeze it as tight as we want, and we're never going to damage the hook link because it's not connected to the hook link directly. So again, with our slot of our split shot facing forwards, let's get this right, facing forwards towards the hook. We're just going to squeeze that down really tight. You can use a pair of forceps to squeeze it even tighter if you want to. And then what I'm going to do, it shouldn't move at all on the cast, but just to make absolutely sure it doesn't, I'm just going to tie this bit of line in an overhand knot, just so there's a little knot in the line, so there's no way the shot can move at all. Slide that down. See, there's a little knot in the line there. There's no way that's going to move now. And just cut the rest of it off. So even if the shot does slip down there, it's never going to get past that knot. So you don't need to super glue it or anything like that. And that is the finished pop-up rig. So we're going to drop this in the tank now, and I'll show you exactly how it sits on the lake bed. Obviously you've got the pop-up boilie here, the hook point facing away from the lead. If you see the hook link there and the hook link coming along here, that's where the lead's going to be at the end of the hook link here, so that the point of the hook is facing away. And the reason that's happening is this split shot is coming off the front of the hook link there on the little stop knot that I've tied previously, and when it comes down to rest it'll always sit out that way. You can see the hook point there is virtually pointing straight down, it's not bent over too much. If I had a hook with an in-turned eye, then the hook would be bent over more, so the point would be pointing back this way more rather than pointing straight down. Now the reason I would normally switch over to a pop-up is if I'm using the bottom bait rig that I showed you earlier, and I'm getting takes where I'm not connecting with fish, so I'm getting a steaming run and I'm picking up the rod, I'm not connecting with a fish. That says to me that the fish is coming down and just putting its mouth around the bait. Now if the bait's lying in the bottom and you've got quite a long hair, half to 3/4 of an inch hair, it puts its mouth around the bait, runs off with it, and the hook's nowhere near the fish's mouth. Now that's an unusual feeding reaction, but it does sometimes happen. So if I'm getting that, and I'll move over to a pop-up, and you can see there, because the two are in quite close proximity, if the fish comes down and puts its mouth around that boilie, there's much more chance of it putting its mouth around the hook as well, because the two are closer together and it's popped up off the bottom a little bit. So that's one situation where I'd move over to a pop-up. The second one is if I'm fishing at long range and I can't get any free baits out there, a pop-up is more visually attractive than a bottom bait, because it's standing up off the bottom, it's not being masked by any of the leaves or anything that will be sitting around the bottom. Also, there's more smell coming out from that boilie because it's coming out from all round the boilie, from the bottom, top, everywhere. If it was a bottom bait, if I drop a bottom bait in here next to it, you can see there that attraction will only leak out from the top of the boilie because the bottom of it is in connection with the bottom. Now the bottom of this tank is far harder than the bottom of most lakes, and the boilie would have settled in probably a little bit more than it is there, so even less of the boilie would be exposed to attract the fish. So if you move over to a pop-up, you've got that attraction leaking out from all around the boilie, from the underneath, from the top, from the sides, everywhere. So it smells more attractive to the fish, and also it's more visually attractive. The times when I wouldn't use a pop-up is if I've got a lot of free baits in the swim. I want my hook bait at the same level as all those other freebies. So I wouldn't want all my freebies lying on the bottom here and then my pop-up a couple of inches above it. It does work, but I much prefer to have my hook bait at the same sort of level as all the other freebies. So if I'm not using any freebies, I'll go over to a pop-up. Now I've showed you how to tie hook links, I'm going to show you how to put them together with lead arrangements to actually get them out into the water. I'm also going to explain what lead arrangements you need to use on what particular type of lake. So first of all, I'm going to take you through the different products you need. This is plastic rig tubing. It goes on the line before you put the lead on and tie your hook link on, and it helps to prevent tangles. And the reason I think it helps to prevent tangles is it makes the line stiffer behind the lead, and it also makes it thicker. I think the reason the hook link tangles with the line is because both items are very thin and they wrap round each other very easily. So the thicker you make the line behind the lead, the less chance there is of tangle. So theoretically, rig tubing that's 2 or 3 times as thick as this is going to be a lot better for anti-tangle than this particular rig tube. But nowadays everyone likes to use thin rig tubes, they think it's less visible. So this is the type of rig tube that I'm going to show you how to put together. It's 0.75mm, which is the bore size, the hole through the middle. The overall thickness is about 1.5mm. And tubing like this, called a camo rig tube in a green colour, is all you really need when you're starting your carp fishing. Next thing are the rubber connectors. They're used to join the tubing and the lead together without the need for any super glue, and I'm going to show you how to use those in a moment. And then the next thing is your size 8 swivels, which fit nicely up inside the front of the inline leads I'm going to show you how to use. I've already used that swivel to tie on the end of the hook link, so I'm going to show you how the whole lot fits together. Now I'm going to talk you through the lead arrangements and the leads themselves. There are basically 4 different designs of lead. The first one is a quarter swivel distance lead. It's got a bullet nosed shape and it's very heavy at the front of the lead, which makes it stable in the air. The more stable a lead is in the air, the further it will cast. So don't look for leads that have got a pointed nose to them, because the weight's normally distributed more evenly around the lead and they tend to move about in the air on the cast. So this particular lead is really needed for long range only, so it's not something you really need to consider at this stage in your carp fishing. The next swivel lead is a swivel pear lead. As you can see, they're sort of pear shaped. This is what you really need when you're beginning your carp fishing. It's plenty good enough for casting, and it will do almost any job you need to do with a swivel lead, so you really don't need to consider this one at this stage in your carp fishing. The next leads are inline leads. That means the line goes through the middle of them. You can see on this one you've got a piece of tubing out the end there, and that actually continues all the way through the lead to the other end. And in the front of these particular leads there's a special cavity that the swivel is going to fit up inside to semi-fix them, to cause a bolt rig. 2 different shapes you've got here. They're called quarter flatliner leads because they're flat and they're in line. There's a flatliner pair, which is like a squashed one of these, and a flatliner distance, which has got 4 flat sides to it. Now either of these will suit your carp fishing. It really doesn't matter at this stage in your carp fishing what design you use, it's really up to you. All I would say is that this lead will cast further than this one because there's more weight in the nose of the lead, but it will also mean that this one will penetrate into the silt a little bit further. Another point worth bringing up at this stage is that flat leads don't sit on silt. A lot of people say that flat leads will come down and rest on the silt nice and softly, but any lead when it's travelling through the water will find the easiest way of going through. So this particular lead will actually go through the water like that rather than like that. So just in case people have told you that flat leads sit on silt, they really don't. They'll find their easiest way through the water. So if you're going to fish in soft silty conditions, the best way to combat it really is to use a lighter lead rather than a flatter one. Okay, so what we're first of all going to do is put an inline lead together. So first of all we need our rig tubing, as I showed you previously. Now this needs to be at least 2 inches longer than the hook link that you're using. So we're going to couple this with our bottom bait rig. You can see there the hook links finishing, if I make it easier for you to see, the hook links finishing there, and you've got, well, there's probably 3 or 4 inches of tubing there out the other side. Now the reason it's got to be 2 inches longer is it stops in the air. If the hook link curls up like that, the extra few inches still ensure that the line doesn't get round over the top of the tubing there, because your line's going to come down from the rod tip through this point, and even if it curls up in the air, there's a little chance of the hook link actually getting past that because it's a few inches longer. So always make it at least 2 inches longer. It's important when you're threading tube that the line is straight, it's not curly, and that the tubing is straight. So to straighten both things, all you need to do is just pull them gently through your fingers, and the warmth of your hands just makes them soften up and straighten, and the same with the line. This line's almost straight anyway, but if it was curly, if I just pulled that through my fingers tightly, it will straighten more and more and more. So if you've got a very curly line, that's what you need to do before threading the tube. Tubes like this one that have got a matte finish are much easier to thread than tubes that have got a shiny finish, and the same with the line. If you use a line that's got a matte finish, it's much easier to get down the tube than lines that have got a shiny finish. So these two are matte, so they're very easy to thread. If you've got two things that are both shiny, they can stick together as the line's trying to get through the tube. So at least one of them should be matte, preferably both of them. So another important thing when you're threading your line down, I'm going to cut the line there at an angle as well, so the line itself has got a very small point on it, and that makes it easier to get through the tube. So I'm just going to put the line in there, thread it down. That's just gone straight through, no problem at all. I actually use 2 to 3 feet of tubing sometimes if I want to protect the line just above the lead. And with this type of rig tube, I can easily thread through 2 or 3 feet of tubing doing exactly the same thing. So the next thing we're going to do is thread the line through the rubber connector, going through the thin end first. I'll just put the line through there. You can see that's gone straight on the line, no problem at all. And then before we put the lead on, I'm going to push the tubing into the end of that rubber connector. And like I said earlier, because I've cut it to a point, it's going to be that little bit easier to push together. So we just gently push that in there, like so. That only has to go in 1/2 centimetre, if that. No need for super glue at this point at all. Nothing's going to pull those two apart when you cast. The beauty of this setup is there's no edges for the hook link to catch on. You can see there's almost no differential at all between where the tubing stops and the rubber starts. That's very important for anti-tangle. If you're going to get a tangle, generally it's going to end up in this sort of area. So if you give the line as little chance to tangle as possible, that's definitely the best way for anti-tangle. So what we're going to do now is put our lead on the end of the line. So again, going through the thin end first, bearing in mind my hand here is what's coming down from the rod tip. That just goes through the lead and out the other side there. That's what I mean by in line. The line's going through the middle of it, and then the hole in the end of that rubber connector has been designed to perfectly fit on the top of that lead, so everything fits together nicely for you. Now I just push that down, and we've created something there that I'm not happy with. There's a gap between the top of the lead and the end of the rubber. And the reason there's that gap is the hole inside the rubber isn't quite long enough to accommodate so much stiff tubing. So what I'm going to do is take that one off, and I'm going to use exactly the same lead that I've cut the end of the tubing off of. So it's a little bit shorter to accommodate that rubber connector. Some of the leads you'll buy have got exactly the right length there. Some are a little bit long, so you have to cut them down. If I take, say, this 2.5 ounce flatliner distance lead, the length of the tubing out the top of that is almost exactly the same as that, so you wouldn't need to touch it. It's only the ones where the tubing's a little bit longer. So we'll thread the line back through this again, and we'll push our rubber connector onto the top of it. And you can see there the two are touching each other, which is exactly what you want. As I said before, perfect anti-tangle system, very little for the hook link to catch on, very smooth taper. We're going down from quite thin rig tube to the thickness of that lead, and there's virtually no lip for the hook link to catch on. That's very, very important. What we're going to do now is tie on our hook link using the Palomar knot again. So we go through the eye of the hook, through the eye of the swivel, back the way we came, so the swivel's running on 2 bits of line there, with a loop at this end, and then I tie that loop in an overhand knot. so the swivel ends up inside the knot. So what I'm going to do now is pass the boilie through this loop so I can tighten the knot down. Goes through there, and as I said before, you want all of the knot to be the right side of the swivel, so I just tease it back over. You can see there the two loops are different sizes, so I'll just pull the line so that all the loops are the same size. Just wet it a little bit before you tighten it down, just to lubricate it, and then holding both bits of line. You can see there one of the loops is tightened down quicker than the other, so I'll pull the line just to get the two exactly the same again, and then tighten it down nice and tight, pulling both bits of line, and then cut off the tag end. You can see there that line absolutely perfect again, no discoloration at all. And then you simply pull the lead back down the line, and the swivel, the size 8 swivel, will just pull nicely into the front of the lead there. You can see that large hole in the front of the lead. The swivel's designed to pull up inside that hole. Like so. And that is now semi-fixed, so if the fish picks up the bait, moves off of it, it's going to feel the weight of the lead. It's going to be dragging the lead along. That's what we call a bolt rig. It causes the fish to bolt when it feels the weight of the lead. If I put this down on the bench, it'll be easier for me to show you how it works. So if you imagine this to be the lake bed, the fish picks up the bait, moves off, hooks in its mouth, and it's dragging that lead along. That's pulling the hook home. That's causing that hook to turn over into the fish's bottom lip, and that's when you're going to get a run. As I said, either of these two leads will do almost exactly the same job, and for your sort of fishing there really isn't any difference between the two. Now before you cast the rig out, you've got to be sure that the fish is going to be able to get rid of the lead if the line snaps. And the way to test it is to imitate what the fish is going to do. So what I'm going to do is hold the hook in my hand, and I'm going to just violently shake the lead to see if I can get it to slide down the line. You know, that's what the fish is going to do. A lot of people test their leads by holding the lead and pulling the hook link out like this. But the fish can't do that. The fish can't hold a lead and pull the hook link at the same time. It's going to have to shake its head to try and get rid of that resistance. So if we pull the swivel back in the lead, so holding the hook carefully in my hand, making sure I don't hook my finger, pick the lead off the lake bed as the fish would, yeah, and it's going to be running off and shaking its head violently, just trying to get rid of that resistance that's hanging underneath it. The swivel there is gradually working its way out of the lead, keep shaking it, and the lead's come off. So now the fish, the line's just pulling through the lead, and the snap line will end up going through the tube, and the fish is away from the lead. And that's a very, very important test to do before you cast any rig out into the water. And if you use this lead arrangement as I've shown you, called a flat line of lead, called a size 8 swivel, you're going to be using a safe rig. There's not really a lot you can do wrong with that at all, because it's all done for you. The cavity inside the lead is made of hard plastic, and what that means is if the lead gets damaged and it tries to cave in, because it's hard plastic, that hole there is going to stay almost exactly the same shape, so it's not going to lock the swivel inside the lead. If this was made of a soft material, there is the opportunity for the lead to collapse in if it hits something very hard, and it may trap the swivel inside. So that's why we make these out of a hard material. Right, the next thing we're going to show you how to do is to put a swivel lead together. Now, I will only use an inline lead if the lake bed is hard. That means when the lead comes to rest, it's not going to settle in to the lake bed. It's going to sit nicely on top of it. If the lead does start to settle into the lake bed, just say the hard part of the lake bed is here and the silt is here, you're dragging the hook link down into the silt because the swivel of the hook link is coming out the front of the lead, so it's dragging it down. So if the bottom is very soft, if it's hard to pull the lead back in when you're fishing, that means it's normally gone into something soft, and then I would swap over to a swivel lead, and I'll show you why that's an advantage in a moment. Another time I wouldn't use an inline lead is if the water's very, very shallow. If it's 2 or 3 feet deep and you're casting a fair distance, the lead is going to come crashing into the bottom. It's very difficult to slow the lead down. And because the hook link's coming out of the front of the lead, you could damage the hook link. So again, if the water's very, very shallow, I'll swap over to a swivel lead. But if I'm fishing most of the waters, you'll probably start fishing when you're starting your carp fishing. They're not very old, they're purpose-made carp waters. They're not very silty because they're not very old. So the lead will come down and rest on the hard bottom like that. And you're going to get a good bolt effect from the inline lead. The fish is, as soon as it moves, it's virtually pulling all of that lead in one go. So it makes a very good bolt rig. It's very easy to put together and it's got perfect anti-tangle qualities. So for most of your carp waters, that's the lead I'll use. Yep. Now I'm going to show you how to put a swivel lead together. And first of all, I'm going to show you the beads that I use to actually clip the swivel lead onto. If we get a close-up of these, they're called a safety bead and they're purpose-made for swivel leads. You can see there that the one underneath has been slightly cut away. If you compare the two, the one on top has got a small lug that the swivel clips into. The lead will clip into this point here, and the top one has still got all the lugs as it will come in the packet, and the bottom one has actually got the lugs cut away so that the swivel lead can get off of the bead more easily. It's just a preference of mine that the lead can get away from that bead as easily as possible. So what I'm going to do now is show you how to put these together. It's very similar to putting together your inline lead. You get some of your rig tube, make sure it's a couple of inches longer than your hook link, cut one end at an angle. I pass the main line through the tube, actually cut it at an angle on both ends here, so I'll make sure the end that's nearest the rod is flat. I'll just thread the line through it. Said before, this rig tube's very easy to thread. Line's gone through it there. We want another rubber connector. That goes on the line again. Thin end first, and then your tubing just pushes into the top of it, as I did the first time. Just gently ease that in. Like I say, that's gone about 1/2 centimetre down. No need to super glue it at that point there. If you do, it will make it brittle and it will snap. There's no force at all to pull it out on the cast. That will stay perfect. Next thing we do is get our safety bead. You clip the swivel lead onto it. It's worth getting a close-up of this. See there? I'm putting the swivel inside and just clipping it on. I'll do that again to make sure you get it. Just clipping the swivel lead on there. That's how the safety bead works. Then the line goes through the end of the safety bead, so it's running on the line there, and your coulter rubber connector just pulls onto the end of that safety bead. Just push that on gently like that, and that's basically what it should look like. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tie my swivel onto this end of the line, and that'll get pulled back into that bead. The only disadvantage of these beads is you have to use a smaller swivel than you would do on your coulter flatliner leads. Unfortunately, there's no way of getting around that. The swivels do come with the beads, so what I'm going to do now is tie my Palomar knot once again through the eye of the swivel, back the way I came, and then I'm going to tie that loop in an overhand knot. And then I'm going to pass the end of the hook link, including the boilie, through the loop, just as I showed you before, and then pull the whole knot the right side of the swivel. Then we'll just wet that. and then just pull it down tight. Pulling both bits of line very, very tight, taking off the excess, and then just snipping off. I think that's the 4th time I've showed you a Palomar knot, possibly even more than that, and just like every other time, absolutely perfect. Hasn't pinched the line, hasn't discoloured it, hasn't gone curly. Very, very easy to tie. The important thing with these safety beads is this swivel must fit very tightly inside the safety bead. Very, very tightly indeed. We'll pull the main line, just pull that swivel right in there. It's very, very tight. And the theory behind this bead is that the lead will pull off of the safety bead before the swivel pulls out the front. If the swivel pulls out the front, then it's very difficult for the lead to come off. And then we do the same test again. We just hold in the hook carefully, we shake the whole thing just like the fish would. You can see there the lead has actually come off of the whole rig. So rather than the line pulling through it like it does with an inline, this one actually releases the lead from the line if it gets snagged up in something. Very good system indeed. So now you're paying fish virtually on a free line. As I said before, I cut back the lugs inside the bead to let the lead come off even easier than it would normally. You don't have to do that, it's just a preference of mine. I'd rather lose the lead than lose the fish and the lead. So I always cut those lugs back. I'll clip that on again and show you how it should all look when it's set up together. That's basically how it should sit before you cast it out. As I said before, you call the rubber connector, virtually no lip at all between the thin tubing and the thickness of the lead. Very, very good anti-tangle rig again, very good design these beads. They cast well and they're very good for anti-tangle. Again, this is a bolt rig. If I put this down as it would be on the lake bed, as the fish runs off, it's going to be dragging that lead. It's going to cause a bolt effect because of the weight of the lead. This lead weighs 2 ounces, and that's really what you want to start with. Anything between 2 and 3 ounces of lead on a hard bottom lake. The heavier the lead, the further the hook's going to get pulled home as the fish drags the lead around. So when you're using a bolt rig, I go for a 2 to 3 ounce lead, and I'll show you later in the video how I put all that together and actually catch some fish on a lead which weighs 2 ounces. Now the advantage I was going to show you of the swivel lead when you're fishing on a soft bottom, all of that can penetrate into the bottom, still leaving the hook link on top. So if you imagine my fingers here being the top of the sill, all of that lead can penetrate in there without dragging the hook link in. If I was using an inline and the hook link was here, it would be dragged that far down into the sill. So if it's a very soft bottom, I'll move over to a swivel lead. The other time I'll move over to one is if I've got a fish extreme range, basically casting as far as I possibly can, I'll go over to a swivel lead again. And if I bring the inline lead into play, I'll explain why it doesn't cast quite so far. When you're casting, because the hook link is coming out the front of the inline lead, the nose of the lead is always being pulled slightly up because of the drag from the hook bait and the hook link. So it's not going out exactly straight, it's pulling it up very, very slightly, which reduces the distance you can cast with it. With a swivel lead, you're still getting the drag from the hook bait, but it's not dragging the nose of the lead because it's pulling from behind it. So it's not pulling the nose of the lead off course, it's slowing it down but not pulling it off course, so it will cast marginally further than an inline lead. So that's another reason I'll go on to a swivel lead. One is if the bottom's soft, and the second one is if I'm trying to get as far as I possibly can. Okay, the last rig I'm going to show you is a running lead rig, which is very, very simple. It works differently from these where the lead is running on the line. So what we're going to do, we'll take all that apart. We can use exactly the same setup, same swivel and everything as we did. We'll put the lead in, we'll put the swivel lead in, and we'll put the lead in. We'll put the lead in, we'll put the swivel lead in, and we'll put the lead in. We'll put the lead in, we'll put the swivel lead in, and we'll put the lead in. We'll put the lead in, we'll put the swivel lead in, and we'll put the lead in. We'll put the lead in, we'll put the swivel lead in, and we'll put the lead in. We'll put the lead in, we'll put the swivel lead in, and we'll put the lead in. We'll put the lead in, we'll put the swivel lead in, and we'll put the lead in. We'll put the lead in, we'll put the swivel lead in, and we'll put the lead in. We'll put the lead in, we'll put the swivel lead in, and we'll put the lead in. We'll put the lead in, we'll put the swivel lead in, and we'll put the lead in. We'll p cut the line here. If you imagine still, this is the line running down from the rod tip. We want a couple of beads. I use rubber beads as they protect the knot when the lead's coming down to rest before you cast. So we put a couple of rubber beads on. Obviously I wouldn't have had the hook link tied on if I was in a fishing situation. I'd put the beads and the lead on first, so this is in the reverse order. I'm putting the lead on last, but really I would put the lead on the line first and then put the beads on. Basically that's how it will sit before you cast it out. The two rubber beads there, they protect the knot, so when the lead comes down to rest before you cast, it's not affecting the knot there, not damaging the knot, and it also pushes the whole thing away from the lead, which helps for anti-tangle. So that's how it will look before you cast it out. On the lake bed, the difference between this rig and the ones I've showed you is it's a running lead. That means the line can easily pass through it without the fish feeling much resistance at all. You see there's the fish runs off with the bait, it's pulling the line through the large round eye swivel that's on the top of all these cauldre leads. Quite free running. Now if you've got a heavy indicator at the rod end, as the fish pulls this through, it's going to feel the indicator. So if I'm using a running lead rig, normally I use very, very light indicators. So as the fish moves off with the bait, it's going to feel the line tightening up and the light indicator. But it's certainly going to react differently on the lake bed to what a bolt rig will. So it won't be completely free running, but it will be different. So if you notice on your lake everyone's fishing semi-fixed rigs like the inline rigs I've showed you and the safety bead I've showed you, it might be worth trying one of these to see if it makes a difference. The fish may have wised up to the bolt rig, and giving them something just a little bit different might give you the edge you need. So on those three lead arrangements, that's really all you need to know. Stick with a pear lead if you're going to use a swivel lead, one of the cauldre flatliner leads if you're going to use an inline. Set them up exactly as I've shown you and you won't go far wrong. That really is all you need to know about lead arrangements. What we're going to do now is put the whole lot into practice, take you over to the sort of carp water that you want to start your carp fishing on. It's a heavily stocked day ticket water. There's lots of fish in a small area, so we should get some action when we see which rigs produce the fish. So thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the banks of Slough House. We've come over to Slough House Lake in Boltham in Essex, which is the typical kind of water you'd want to fish when you're first starting your carp fishing. It's not a very big lake and it's heavily stocked, so there's a good chance there's going to be fish in the area fairly quickly. What we're going to do first of all, before we start fishing, is get some idea of the contours of the lake bed and the depths we're fishing at. So I'm going to use a marker float to gauge the depth in front of me. Marker float set up like this. This is a solar Thunderbird marker, the small one, tied to the end of the line. Next down you've got a rubber bead which guards the knot, and then a hard bead which sits up against the rubber bead and allows the float to travel up easily. Next down we've got a 2-ounce cauldre pear lead with a large Berkeley swivel on the top. That's how they come as standard, and it basically works like this. The lead will sit on the bottom of the lake with the float suspended above it, and as you let line out from the reel, the float will rise above the lead, eventually coming to the surface. I record the depth that I've let the float up, wind it back down to the lead, draw it in slightly and repeat the process. And I'll do that from as far as I can cast generally, back down to underneath the rod tip to get a good idea of what's out in front of me. Once I've found some interesting features, then I'll leave the float there and cast to them or bait up to them. Okay, I'm going to put the float out to just beyond the ripple, which is as far as I really want to fish today. Right, it's quite shallow there. Wind down so the line is tight. Put the bait runner on, and then with the reel tucked in, right up against your waist, just let a foot of line out. 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot. So it's 4 foot deep there. So what I'll do then, pull into the side. The float's now back against the lead. I'll wind down a little bit and then carefully pull into the side. I'll just pull back. I can feel that lead bouncing over stones on the bottom, so I know it's a hard bottom. I'll wind down again, bait runner on, then just let a foot of line out at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's virtually exactly the same depth there. Pull the float back down to the lead, and again just gently pull the float back, and I can feel that bouncing along the gravel again. Wind back down, bait runner on, 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, a little bit deeper here, 5 foot. So in that short space there, it's got about a foot deeper. Pull the float back down to the lead, wind back down again, just pull back. Feels a little bit softer there than where it was originally. So it's about a foot deeper and the bottom's a little bit softer. On goes the bait runner. 1, 2, 3. About 3.5 foot right down here. And we'll give it one more. Take a couple of swims down there. Right under the rod tips now. 1, 2, 3. 3.5 foot. Okay, repeat the process slightly to the left of where I cast the first time. Let's see what we've got a little bit further over. Hard gravel again, feel the lead hit the bottom there. Tighten down to the float, so the float and the lead are right next to each other. And let off that foot of line. It's important to tuck the reel right up against your waist there. And if you just extend your left arm out, you can't pull much more than the foot of line out. So that's a good gauge for a foot. So it's 1, 2, 3, 3 foot there. And we draw the float down, back next to the lead, just by pulling the rod to the side. You feel that go tight, the two are next to each other again. So we just pull the float back gently. I can feel the lead bouncing over the gravel. Rod tips bouncing quite violently. Wind back down, pointing the tip of the rod at the float, reel tucked in next to your waist, and then just pull out a foot of line. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 foot. I've left the float out there on some gravel. I'm just going to put a few mainline response pellets out to the float just to get the area going before we cast out. Perfect, right next to the float. I'll leave that out there until I cast, so I know I'm right on top of the pellets I'm putting out at the moment. Little tip for you when you're using your bait runner reels. Use the bait runner facility as little as possible when the rod's actually on the bank and when the bait's on the bank. By all means use the bait runner facility when the bait's out in the water, but if you overuse it when it's on the bank, you twist the line really badly. So when you're ringing up the rod or you're pulling a bit of line off to get the rig a bit closer to you, resist the temptation to use the bait runner facility. Just open the bail arm or take off the anti-reverse and let the reel back wind, and that will save your line. Okay, we're going to tie on our first rig, very basic inline rig, line going through the middle of the lead. Before you put your line through your anti-tangle tube, if you straighten it out by pulling it tightly through your fingers, the line will go nice and straight, and it makes it easy to thread down the tube. Another tip is cut the end of the line with a sharp pair of scissors at an angle. There's a little tiny point on the line, and that also makes it easier to get it through the tube. I do the same thing with the rig tube, just straighten it out, just warm it through your fingers. You can see that's nice and supple anyway. This is the Calder car key rig tube, 0.75mm. We'll find that quite easy to thread. Down goes the line. If you use this Calder rig tube and you have trouble threading it, it's generally going to be the line. Now it's gone straight through there. If the line's all curly at the end, you find it a lot harder to get it through the rig tube. Next thing we put on is a Calder rubber connector, which is the thing that connects the tube and the lead. So that's on there. And then we're going to put on a 2-ounce flatliner pear lead. Before I do that, I'm just going to snip the end of the lead off, because the stiff piece of tube that comes out of the end of the lead is a little bit long for the hole inside the rubber connector. That'll all fit together in a minute and you'll see how that works. So I've just cut that off there, like so. Lead goes on, thin end first, and then we pull all 3 items together. So the rubber connector goes on the top of the lead, like that, and then the rig tubing just pushes into the top of the connector, and it only has to go a few millimetres in, and that's it. That is the lead arrangement. Looks a bit complicated, but it's very, very easy to set up. Only 3 components, no super glue, rig tube, Calder rubber connector, flatliner lead. That's your lead system done. And if you use that on most hard bottoms lakes, that'll fish very well. Next thing we're going to do is tie on the hook link that I tied up for you indoors a bit earlier in the video. Put a bottom bait on there, and then put a little bit of response pellet around the lead to attract the fish straight in to the baited area. So I use the old faithful Palomar knot. Through the eye of the swivel, back the way I came, so the swivel's running on 2 pieces of line. And then tie those 2 pieces of line in an overhand knot. So you've got a big loop sticking out the end of the knot. Pass the end of the hook link through the loop, and then just gently pull the knot back to the right side of the swivel. Plenty of lubrication. Pull both bits of line down tightly. Done. Very simple. Nail clippers help me get in nice and close there. Now we're pulling the swivel back inside the lead to semi-fix it. Boom. So that's semi-fixed. If the line snaps, eventually that lead's going to come off. So it's safe from the fish's point of view. Okay, just putting a bottom bait straight on, ready-made boilie straight out the packet. I'm going to use savoury pellets, so I'm using a savoury type boilie. This one is tuna. $18mm boilie. On the hair, and the boilie stop. Right, that's the point most people would finish at. What I'm going to do to add a bit of attraction, I'm going to mould some pellets round that lead. And what I've done prior to coming over here, I've doused them in boiling water, sloshed the water around them so they're all coated in boiling water, and that makes them go very soft and slushy, and that will allow me to mould it round the lead there so that the fish come in straight away and they're attacking that pellet. They want the pellet, and lying right next to it is your boilie. So we should get some action virtually straight away. Very, very good method. Okay, you can see the pellet there. It's gone a bit mushy where I've had the boiling water on it. You can squeeze it quite easily into a bowl, and that's all we need round the lead. So we get a little bit in the palm of your hand, place the lead on top of it, get a little bit more, and just squeeze the whole lot nice and tightly together around the lead, and that will stay on the cast and start breaking up as soon as it hits the bottom. Now we're going to put our pellet and hook bait out to where the marker float is. So just a nice easy lob, not going very far. Rod back on the rests, just tighten down to that lead. Still haven't put the bait runner on. On it goes now. Onto the pod. Indicator on. Okay. I'll turn the volume down just while I'm setting the indicator. Hopefully that's going to rattle off in a few minutes time. We'll go on to the second rod now and set that one up as well. Just gently lob this out over the top of that pellet. Sink the line down. Set the reel so the roller is up at the top next to the rod, then put them down on the pod. So the dangler's on. And then put the volume on once you've set the indicator so that everybody else doesn't have to listen to your buzzers. There you go, a little bit sensitive. That's it. And we're away. What we're going to do on this cast is put a back lead on because we're getting quite a few line bites, and we think that the fish might be a bit line shy seeing as there's a lot of pressure on this lake all the time. So I'm going to put it back out to the baited spot, put a back lead on and see if that makes a difference. Okay. I'll fire my back lead. There we go. To put a back lead on, all I do is put the tip of the rod behind me, get hold of the line, slot the line into the back lead clip. It's got a little cut in it to get the line into, and just slide it down. Into the margins. Just let it go down through the water and onto the bottom The line's gone slack there, so the back lead's hit the bottom. So I'll just wind down a little bit. Set the reel up. Bait runner on. Turn the buzzer down. And just onto the pod. There we go, the line's nicely held down on the bottom there now. We'll see if that makes a difference on that left hand rod. If it does, then we'll put it on the right hand rod as well. We're in, finally. Kiting over to the right. Oh. Come on, baby. That was the rod with the back lead on. I wonder if that made a difference. Just guiding it away from the other line. Notice I'm not playing the fish on the clutch, playing it on the back wind to save the line. The more you use the clutch or the bait runner, the more you twist the line. It's right down in front of me now. Little mirror, £5–6 I suppose, maybe a bit smaller. Nice light £2 test curve rod, just absorbing all the little lunges it makes. It's actually a ghostie. Just sink the net down where we're going to net him. Got him. Hooked slap bang in the bottom lip there. Absolutely perfect. Just there in the bottom lip. Absolutely perfect. Barbless hook comes out nice and easy. Little ghost carp. Tuna boilie again. It's on the same rod I just had the fish on. They're obviously starting to feed now. Not a very big one again, I don't think. Got him. Another ghostie. Ghostie common this time, about £7–8 I suppose. Beautiful fish. Now that is absolutely perfectly hooked. I'll try and put his mouth up to the camera for you. Alright, let's get that barbless hook out. Oops. Alright, let's come straight out that. Gorgeous little fish. Absolutely gorgeous.